South Africa, about 45,000 domestic workers lost their jobs in the first quarter of 2016. Meanwhile, the International Labour Organization reported that about 1 million women in the South African workforce are employed as domestic workers, and that South African domestic workers are the least protected around the world. Platforms recruiting domestic workers have grown in numbers, but how protected is the sector of the workforce in South Africa? For more on this, we're joined in studio by Namhla Duma. She is the Director of Premium Domestic Services. Unfortunately, we were also going to be joined by Kitiwe Mbebe, one of her clients who is a domestic worker, but unfortunately Kitiwe could not be with us this morning. It would have been great to have her in studio, but hopefully we can chat to her at another time. Good to have you though, thank you. Thanks for coming in, Namhla. So when we talk about the domestic workforce, what are some of the biggest challenges that they face?
I think, well, predominantly it really would have to be salary.
Yeah,
that's the biggest problem. I don't think that people are quite knowledgeable about exactly how much they're meant to be paying their domestic workers, or just to say compliant. But also domestic workers are at a point where, you know, the minimum wage is just not enough for them to survive, to be truthfully honest.
So let's talk about minimum wage. What are the minimum wages for domestic workers?
In Area A, so that's your urban areas, you're looking at about 2.4, 2.5 a month currently.
Sure.
Area B, little less than that, so that's your non-urban areas, you're looking at about 2.2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is really not...
That's
not a living wage.
It's a drop in the ocean.
Yeah.
It's not really. So it is quite a struggle. It is quite a struggle for the domestic workers. They're barely able to survive on that amount.
You know, when we look at the, you know, there's one thing where you talk about this amount of money, but what are the hours? I mean, you're working a normal day, or how do the hours range?
The hours range, well, legally they're supposed to work your normal 8-hour day. Okay. 8-hour day, 9-hour day, maximum about 45 hours a week.
Yeah.
And obviously your overtime, so your Sundays are overtime, public holidays are overtime, of which public holidays they don't have to work if, you know, they don't want to, but that's obviously the arrangement that they have with the employee.
Yeah. And you know, when you look at this minimum wage, and I mean, so people do, some people don't even stick to this.
No, some people don't.
That's what makes it worse. I mean, I remember, you know, it made quite a big outcry for many South Africans, where I think there was a story quite recently, please remind me, I'm sure you saw this one, where somebody was advertising a position online and it was something ridiculous.
Definitely. I actually had a client inquire about 2 weeks ago, and the first thing I generally ask my clients is, you know, where do you live, and what is your offer, so that I can really profile and give them a client that suits a candidate that suits their needs. And she was offering 2,000 rand. 2,000
rand,
which is even less than the minimum requirement.
Yeah. So how do we protect our domestic workers? Because, I mean, you know, when you look at a domestic worker and what a domestic worker does, you know, they run your household, they look after your children, they cook for you, they clean for you, Definitely. They're in your house 24/7. You know, these are an extension of ourselves. And yet there have to be some of the most abused sectors of the workforce here in South Africa. What do we need to do to change this?
Look, it's a double-edged sword, because there's the issue of professionalizing, you know, domestic workers, but then there's also the issue of them being professional. So you find that people treat domestic workers based on their behavior. So people will simply say, well, firstly, you know, she lives with me, you know, I feed her, she's using my water, she's got free accommodation. So on top of paying her salary, in actual fact, I'm spending far more. So they count what they're doing towards their livelihood while they're living with them, and then they give them that amount of money. So it's very hard, because then the domestic workers as well, and I don't speak for all of them, but they themselves are not professional towards their work. So then in actual fact now the employee as well is not, they don't understand that it's a professional relationship that has to be maintained still.
Yeah.
So I think if everybody just comes to the party, the domestic worker and the employee, and understand that this is a business transaction and it is a work relationship.
It certainly should be. I mean, that's how it should be viewed.
That's how
in
it
every
definitely
way.
should be.
Have you got many undocumented labourers that are here working in South Africa and that are coming from neighbouring countries that are desperate. They'll take any position at any price, which seems, to be one of the big issues that we're dealing with.
You do get very desperate ladies, especially a lot of Zimbabwean ladies. So they'll come in the country. Before they were issued permits, so this was about 2010, got permits which lasted for about 4 or 5 years. They were renewed again. They were given 3 years. So the ladies that came in after they were given the 3 years are not documented. Most of them have passports which have overextended their stay in South Africa. They're good ladies, they're looking for jobs, they're desperate, they're hardworking, but they're not documented. And it's a problem with the clients because then, if you have a small child, you're not about to take someone who's not even in the country legally. So there's that aspect of that. And those that do have permits, I do note that they're expiring end of December and they're really not sure what's going to happen after that.
Yeah.
So they're just not bothering with that whole process. So to answer your question, there are quite a few ladies that are undocumented, don't have the right paperwork.
One of the other issues, and I see that in one of the cases that we're talking about in October last year, around 3,000 domestic workers took to the streets. They were protesting against some of the situations that they live in as well, besides the fact that they're being underpaid. But some claim that they were alleged victims of sexual assault. Now, what measures are in place to protect these ladies? It's quite difficult because, on most of the occasions you are by yourself in a strange household living there, and the practices that happen within this house perhaps are not they're very unsavory. What do you do? How do you protect yourself?
I would say, having a good working relationship with your domestic worker is very vital. I mean, I also have a domestic worker and we have a very open relationship. So if she struggles with anything, or if she firstly living in an estate or a complex, you tell us for security reasons, always keep the door locked. If you know the garden gentleman is coming, just make sure, all the safety measures are in place. And just find out, I always say, create a loving relationship with your domestic worker so that she can trust you. Find out, are you okay? Is everything still fine? Always touch base and just allow for that rapport between the both of you.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no two situations are alike, and obviously every household is different. You can only try as best as you can to put the right security measures in place and, try and protect your domestic worker as much as you can. But the onus is also upon them just to make you aware of anything that's happening in the house that, is inhibiting them. Yeah.
So your service, what the services that you protect, I mean, the premium domestic services, do you take a percentage of the domestic worker's salary?
No.
You don't at all?
No.
Do they come to you free of charge for any advice that they may need?
So basically what we do is we create a file for them. So there's a small registration fee of about 100 Rand. We create a file for them, we do a profile for them, and then we put them on our database. Then the client comes to us to say, I'm looking for a domestic helper or I'm looking for a nanny. We then profile based on who we have on the database. Then I schedule interviews where I sit with the candidates, I sit with the potential employee, and we conduct interviews. And so the relationship is between the both of them. They sign a contract between them both. I have a contract with the client.
Great.
So the client is the one who actually pays me.
Excellent.
Yes, and it's a once-off fee. The client pays me a once-off fee. And for the first 90 days, we're still very much a part of that relationship. So we check in on the client, we check in on the domestic worker individually, just to find out, the transition. Are they working well together? If in the first month the client says, I don't think we're the right fit, then we replace her with somebody else who still fits the profile within that same amount. There's no charge after that. So within the same amount until we feel that they have settled in well and they actually have a good relationship. Good working relationship.
Great. So there is protection there in this kind of way. And I mean, it would be great if most domestic workers could in some way have somebody that's looking after them.
After them, no.
And they can, and you can call someone. You can say, look, I'm not happy with the way things are panning out, and have some sort of a negotiation in between. Which is a great
definitely.
thing.
I always tell my ladies, the first 3 months, we're on probation. Everybody's trying to find their footing. So if in the first month you may feel uncomfortable, give me a call. I'm available any time of the day. Let me know. I'm still here. I haven't just dumped you and left you there. So
excellent. Yeah. People want to get hold of you. How do we get in touch with you?
They can drop me an email on predomestic@gmail.com.
Predomestic
at gmail.com. Or they can contact us on 078 874 0670.
0670.
Yes, you can WhatsApp, you can call, you can
Excellent.
send SMS, and we'll respond to that.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thanks very, very much for joining us on the program. Namhla Duma, she's a director of Premium Domestic Services. We're talking about the rights of domestic workers here in South Africa, minimum wages, and some of the issues that they do face as being one of, as we've stated, one of the most abused sectors of our working labour force here in South Africa.